Could You podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. All right. Welcome to the season premiere of Season 3. And to all of you new to the show, we are a married couple who met at a movie theater and never really left. We discuss, debate, and celebrate all of film's best how could you questions, from how could you not have seen that film to how could you not love that film, and everything in between.
I love the description you wrote. Can I just say that?
Oh,
is that okay to say?
Thanks.
To start us off.
Try not to stumble over.
You did a wonderful job. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for deciding to press play. If you've been with us, you know this how could you question started with the fact that I had not seen The Goonies until I was an adult. And that causes some very severe reactions with people. But I'm glad in your description today that you highlighted something that's going to be really important about this season. We are going to explore and expand the idea of how could you. Because if you are a movie fan, you know you feel passionately about your film and especially passionate about the things that you love most about film. So that's going to be today's debate. And it's going to start from a DVD combo pack of all places.
You gotta love that, right?
Right.
You can see how long we've been hanging on to this debate.
But this is the crazy thing to me, as I'm sure we'll get into, is this is something that you and I used to debate about because we had this DVD. We started dating in 2004, and that's probably around the time that we started combining our DVD collection, which is really the most serious commitment you can make to a person.
Absolutely.
But it also feels something of a bygone era now, the buying of many DVDs, which we used to do frequently. And we thought, given that it's back to school for a lot of American public high schools, we thought we wanted to start with something that is a back to school movie themed around high school.
Movie or movies?
Movies. That's a good point. It is. Although I really want to only acknowledge one of the films that we're going to be talking about today.
Coming in hot on this one.
So I'll ask you, Ryan, do you have favorite back to school movies or movies that remind you of like the beginning of the school year?
You know, I'm really excited about this today because, you know, we did start, our first season last year with The Goonies. Great coming of age type movie, obviously. And high school movies really fall under that. And I think it's important a lot in the discussion when we do talk about these things today is we're kind of putting this in the high school films, right? Not the teen films. And I think that there can be a varying degree on that, because we did a great bracket a couple months ago of the best teen films of all time. And we got into a huge debate over whether Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet should count in there or not. So today we're talking high school films. No debate on that, right?
No, completely. I mean, like Romeo and Juliet's kind of like the OG teen story, but I agree. There is a very big difference between the teen film and the high school film because I often think that the dividing line is this, that I feel like films about high school or that are high school centric or themed really want to explore what that moment in time means. They're often authentic and genuine to experiences where I feel like teen films are like the fantasy version that none of us ever really live as teenagers. Right. So I always appreciate high school films that are willing to show it warts and all, that are really willing to kind of dive into kind of at times the heavier stuff that you experience as a teenager, the awkwardness of being a teenager, because we're all awkward as teenagers, even the ones who seem like they're not. They're secretly awkward.
I think, you kind of said, I think you and I both probably fall under the same feelings that the high school films that spoke to us most as kids and speak to us even now that we enjoy, or the films that felt more grounded and a little more realistic, right? Like, not so over the top, the zaniness. And not to say anything's wrong with those. I mean, those films, we saw when we were high school kids and we laughed and we, they just don't seem to stay, right? I think the two films that we'll end up talking today have a little bit more of that. They felt more authentic and they felt a little more real. And I think that's why we're able to talk about them so much. Your question to me was, what's kind of my favorite? One of my all-time, and we've talked about it plenty of times on the show, is American Graffiti. And I think American Graffiti will probably be brought up a couple of times as we talk today.
Oh, you better believe it will be.
Because there's no way that you don't see, the blueprint that American Graffiti gave to both of these films. So.
That's the clincher of my argument later. Can you just forget that you mentioned American Graffiti earlier?
Yeah, right. But I mean, but that doesn't mean that there's not other great, high school films, and they don't all again have to feel so authentic. But like for me, Ghost World's a great one.
Yes, 100%.
We like Can't Hardly Wait a lot. Recently, Booksmart, fantastic.
Booksmart is incredible because it has all the zaniness and like kind of hyper reality you want, but grounded and firm look at like ardent friendships in high school. It's such a great movie.
Yeah. And every few years and every group of, it's what high school kids like about them high school films. They get older and the high school films stay the same age, right? Like,
what a weird appropriation of that quote.
But I mean, you just think of all the time, as we span all these films that drop in there. Like, we could just sit there. We've already done a show on Clueless that falls in there. And that feels, a little bit... Like, I can't necessarily say that I know those characters, but it still is a great high school film.
But I know those feelings.
Yeah.
Sense of not belonging, where do I fit within this, what persona do I want to exist in high school? I think we all feel that. And that's sometimes what makes some of those films the ones that translate generation to generation. No lie. So as I've mentioned before, probably on the podcast, I'm a high school teacher, and I had a student on the first day of class that talked to me about Ferris Bueller's Day Off this year. This is completely real. And I thought to myself, there's a very specific reason why that translates. Not because most teenagers end up jumping on parade floats, but because those characters feel very real, especially Cameron. Like, Cameron feels in his...
I still feel like Cameron.
You are Cameron. When Ryan went out of Egypt land. And I think that's why those resonate, and you keep seeing generation after generation revisit those films, because it's not about the times in which they live, but they feel so authentic and timeless because of how they capture youth. And I remember that being a really big turning point when I was in high school in the early aughts. Like, you had all of a sudden like teen fiction that like, so I'm talking about like literary fiction that was coming out that was being written more in an authentic way. Obviously before this you have like The Outsiders, but books like Speak and The Perks of Being a Wallflower, those were coming out like when I was in high school. And I think when things speak authentically to us, they transcend time.
But I'm glad we were talking about Ferris Bueller, because there's no way to talk about high school films without bringing up John Hughes, because he's so influential of Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and,
Pretty in Pink.
Pretty in Pink, thank you. And then even that time you have Some Kind of Wonderful and a lot of those just great, really popular 80s high school films that are still sticking around with people today. So, those types of films, obviously we have to talk about anytime we're talking about high school movies. And then, like I said, I love how you look at every decade and how these films speak to people. Dope is a great one.
Oh, I love Dope.
Mean Girls is probably a huge one. So just all of these films. But they there's two... We start getting to the cream of the crop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be hard-pressed to not start thinking about the two films we're going to discuss today. And do you want to enlighten everybody a little bit on how we kind of came about this particular episode today?
Of course. So, as maybe previewed a little earlier, we had a DVD combo pack. And in this DVD combo pack existed two films, Dazed and Confused and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So I want to paint a scene a little bit for Dazed and Confused. Directed by Richard Linklater. Before this, he had done a film called Slacker, which was pretty popular in the independent film festival circuit. He was kind of becoming immediately a hot commodity, one of those directors where they say, the next this. That's kind of where Richard Linklater was in his career. Not a lot of experience, but a lot of desire to tell authentic, youthful stories. And if you know anything about Slacker, that's kind of the purposefulness of that film. In fact, a very young Kevin Smith would see that movie and it would inspire him to become a director. That's why Slacker seems, or I should say Clerk seems, a little bit like Slacker.
Yeah, gosh. I don't know if I knew that before, but I can totally see that.
I only recently found this out because of a resource I'll talk about later. So the year is 1992, and Richard Linklater amasses just about the who's who of 90s actors to descend upon Austin, Texas, to film on location, something that was not happening in the early 90s for these types of films. But he wanted to really immerse them because he wanted to tell the story of what it felt like to be a teenager at his high school in 1976 in Austin, Texas. And when you think about this cast and we think about what he's trying to capture, it feels niche. It feels like, well, of course, if that was my music, if that was my town, I would totally feel what's going on in that film. But what he ends up creating is something so personal, so authentic, so specific, yet so universal. It belongs in the canon of best high school films of all time. And then there's the other movie in the pack. Ryan?
Again, why are you coming at me? I'm talking about one of the all-time great films today. My film, on the other side of the DVD pack, you flip it over and it's on the other side, is, a little film from 1982 called Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I mean, Amy Heckerling directing, Cameron Crowe writing it, a film about high school kids through a year and just their entire experience through it. I'm ready to defend it, and how could you pick Dazed and Confused over Fast Times?
How could you pick Fast Times over Dazed?
Ding, ding, here we go.
All right, so as we've been kind of like sneak peeking throughout this, so we had this DVD combo pack. Now, back when we bought this, did we have any dreams of a podcast? Of course not, because podcasting wasn't as popular yet, for sure, because we're going back quite a number of years. But it's really interesting.
Are you saying it's popular now? Are there other podcasts out there?
I mean, I hope you only have ears for our podcast, but if you do so indulge, you probably know there's a bevy of podcasts out there. And I remember that you and I would experience these films, and because of virtue of the fact that they were in a combo pack together, this weird civil war began between you and I over which high school film is better. I mean, listen, as I'm sure we'll get to, they're both great, but like...
Yeah, yes, I want to defend... Before we get going on this, I'm going to say it. You don't have to have the same feelings. I absolutely love both these films. My sister will kill me if I do not say I love Dazed and Confused.
And being that I watched my brother throughout most of my childhood do the Spicoli dance, I think he'll kill me if I don't say that Fast Times is a great movie.
So our siblings do not kill us.
Yes.
Let it be known throughout the land. Both of us love these films, and we're going to have a good spirited debate today.
100%. It's just that my movie's better.
But we do have... So we decided today how we're going to do this is we're going to actually kind of do a tale of the tape type, fight style, and break this down a little bit into categories.
I really appreciate the sports metaphor that you just threw into our movie podcast.
I saw Jake Paul fight the other night, and now I got a whole boxing thing going on.
There's just things you don't say out loud. But go ahead, please explain our categories.
Fight. I can fight. So we're just, we're breaking this down. We're going to get to your main categories you would think with these types of films. I mean, both of these films, like we said, are readily talked about as two of the best high school films of all time, two great films of all time in cinema. They're always highly ranked, and they both, again, kind of are, and you made me lose my train of thought with that noise that I don't know what it was.
That noise is to the fact that one of these films is really well crafted, and one of them I do not think is as well crafted. I know!
Ooh, this might be way more contentious than I expected it to be. I do want to say, though, and we're going to talk about this, these two films get compared a lot. Like, they get paired up a lot. Not just the DVD box set, but, like, when people talk about them. And I don't know if they should. Which is what we're going to talk about a lot today.
They're not the same movie.
Yeah.
They're not the same movie at all.
So let's get into it. We've been blabbering on here. We're going to go long today. I'm just going to say it right off the bat. It's the first episode
Buckle
back.
in.
So buckle in. At some point, folks, we'll get back to our hour shows. Today won't be that day. We got two big movies to talk about. So let's start with the first one. Let's jump right into the writer. So I'm kind of cheating by picking the writing category first, only because it leads into, it's so important how this film gets made. So I'll start talking about Fast Times immediately. So the writer for Fast Times at Ridgemont High is none other than Cameron Crowe, who would go on to be one of the best directors of all time. He's a great screenwriter. This is one that he did the screenplay, but did not direct. So, if you don't know the story, it's a wild story with Crowe. In 1979, he goes to high school. He's writing for Rolling Stone at the time. He goes to a high school in California, and it's, I believe it was Claremont High School in San Diego. And he goes to them and says he wants to spend a year in the school undercover and write a book. The principal's kind of a little iffy about it, but then finds out he writes for Rolling Stone, and he knows all of these, musicians, and huge music fan. The principal decides to let him do this. So,
man, to be teaching in the 70s, right? Oof.
So Crow spends a year in the high school, and writes this book. Only, I believe, my understanding is only 3 people knew he was undercover while he was there. So, 1980, the book gets published, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. If anybody has a copy, let me know, because I went looking for one and could not find one under a really exorbitant amount of money. Probably more money than the studio gave Fast Times to make this movie.
Fair.
But he writes this book. So, right off the bat, Crow is an all-time writer.
True.
And he ends up writing the screenplay. He's attached to it and sticks on with helping the film to be made throughout. He actually helps a lot of the production part of this. And you see Crow's writing throughout. I mean, each of these characters are based off of somebody he knew in the high school. It's probably why these characters feel so authentic. It was an actual experience that he put out there. Now, obviously, some things were changed once it got into the film. We'll talk about that probably a little bit later when we're talking about these characters and some differences between the book and how these characters develop. Obviously, Amy Heckerling has a huge influence because Crow has his writing style is fantastic. He brings the experience. Heckerling brings the female touch that this film absolutely needed. But Crow's writing, again, is all over this. I mean, and this is why he is just one of the all-time best screenwriters with Almost Famous and We Bought a Zoo, and one of the best high school films of all time, Say Anything. He's all over the map in this, and each character, I think, is his credit to why these characters feel so real.
Ugh. I as you know, I don't surrender. Never surrender.
Never surrender.
All-time pump-up song. I can't argue with what you just said, because Cameron Crowe is such a phenomenally proficient screenwriter. The thing I've always appreciated about his screenwriting is that his characters have heart, but they have teeth too. Like, he's not completely unwilling. Like, he doesn't want some, cutie pie version of what these characters can be. I think Almost Famous is Russell's a great example of that. Russell's incredibly likable, but also incredibly detestable as well. And you definitely see this with the characters in this, with the exception of Damone. Damone just sucks the whole movie. And I even as we were writing this category down, I thought to myself, he's going to list Cameron Crowe films. He knows it's going to be impossible for me to argue against it. And he's going to end with Say Anything, because he's going to know that's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm not going to be able to say anything to that. So here is what I'll say. I think what Richard Linklater, or as apparently he's called when he was on set, Rick, which I think is, I don't know why that entertains me. I think what he captures is a really naturalistic approach to the writing of the script. It is very much dependent upon the strength of the actors to improvise, but I think not out of need for, I'm just hoping magic happens. I think he gave enough of a body there for them to work with. I deeply appreciate the fact that there are just these kind of very casual lines in it. I do find this film to be very quotable, despite how much it was improvised. And I find the structure of how he wrote this story to be very fascinating. The production of this is very interesting. He almost came to death blows with one of the people on his crew because they just felt like he was unpolished, unfinished. And one of the actors in a book that I'm reading called All Right, All Right, All Right, it's by Melissa Mertz, talks about how there was an actor who did not believe that he had a shot list for every day, like that he was just making it up, but it wasn't. It was all crafted so that way it felt authentic and organic for them, but it was very well planned by Rick Linklater. That all being said, No, 100% you win the screen. Yeah, 100% Cameron Crowe wins.
Close personal friend, Cameron Crowe.
It's a great story there, that's for sure.
One day, again, if you see us out, I'll tell that story
yeah,
over
100%.
There's no... I know that this was a cheat by me putting this category first. There's no way that you give it... And Linklater's... His strength is not in his writing and character development in all of his films. Yeah.
And I'll say that one of the things that I really appreciate about Cameron Crowe is, as a writer for this film, is that the writing is incredibly polished, but genuine too.
Yeah.
I don't feel like this is not the Dawson's Creek effect that would come in the 90s where teenagers would have to sound like 30-year-olds with their PhD. Like, this is 100% these conversations feel very real. I think the best written character in terms of her dialogue is, I think, Phoebe Cates' character. There's something about how she delivers that just feels like how a best friend would advocate for you. I don't know. There's just something very real about how she's written that I think just resonates. And I think that's Cameron Crowe's right. And her performance, of course.
Yeah.
But there's something about how her dialogue that feels authentic to me.
More fleshed out characters, and you talk about that's the big thing, and we'll talk over and over, that gives Fast Times such credit, is these characters are, now they're all played by mid-20-year-olds, but they're all trying...
Wasn't Phoebe Cates, though, 18? Wasn't
yes,
she,
yes,
like, one of the younger
yes,
castmates, I believe?
So. Yes. Yeah. But they're all trying... When they're talking more, quote-unquote, adult or older... It's because they're trying to. It is intentional.
Yes.
And it is supposed to be transparent that is exactly what's going on.
And it's in that way when we are teenagers and we believe we're talking maturely, that we don't understand that there is this, like, kind of juvenile cadence to how we even talk about, like, more adult things. And I don't say that pejoratively towards teenagers. Like, I'm not ageist in that way. It's more of just, like, it's that kind of freshness of experiences. And I'll ask this because, obviously, we've now declared you the winner of the writer category.
Victory! I'm going to retire right now.
You best. Because the other ones aren't going to go this easy. Is there a character in this that you kind of attach to that you think is, like, the best written character in the film? Or there are a few of the characters that you
really... From Fast Times?
From Fast Times.
I think... And again, once we talk about characters and everything like that, but, tip in my hand pretty easily, Stacy and Brad, to me, are two of the best written characters. Specifically Stacy, completely. There's an argument to be made that she's the main character of the film in this big ensemble piece. But I think there's a lot to the Brad character that is underappreciated. So those would be the two that I would jump out and say. Now, I'll have a question for you at the end of the show about which character from these films you most relate to. And we'll get there, but that would be a different answer for me. But most well-written characters, I think, has to be Stacy.
Okay, no, I totally get that. And the thing is I don't want to sleep on Dazed here, because obviously I'm here to defend Dazed. Like,
you're going to have plenty to talk about. Very high.
And I think that's perhaps why, because I know there are other aspects of this film where this shines. But again, like, there is something to the kind of naturalistic, very, like, kind of raw and organic way in which, in which Dazed is constructed that I really appreciate, which is a credit to the screenwriting of going, this is going to be this is a night. This is a snapshot of what it is to be a teenager at the end of the school year. And although it's very much firmly set in the 70s, I think it feels like that last day of school, any decade, anywhere. Even if necessarily it doesn't exactly look the same, I think those emotions feel very real. And I think that's where, I think what Richard Linklater was trying to capture was something besides kind of what was written on the page. And I think he's very effective at that. But I do think it's what kind of lends itself naturally to talking about this and saying that Cameron Crowe wins for the screenwriting.
Yeah, and let's I think it needs to be said, though, right? Like, this isn't just fandom. Obviously, that's a huge thing for us, but it is a better written script.
It's tighter.
Yeah.
It's 100% tighter.
In that regard. And also, if anybody's ever seen Boyhood, Cameron Crowe's going to win every time.
Well, yeah, we are not big fans of Boyhood here.
I think I showed Linklater's vision, but not his writing.
Fair.
So, anyway, so we'll give will give me the victory. Yay.
Fine.
But let's move on to one I think is going to be an interesting category. Let's move on to director. You have, again, you're going to have to talk about Linklater here and defend Linklater a lot.
Yeah, and here's the thing. One, I am going to say, I have a major gap for Linklater, and I won't try and fake that I don't have this gap. I've never seen Before Sunrise. I know of one particular audience member who tunes in frequently that's going to be screaming at his radio right now at that fact. I'm not a Linklater person, but I will 100% and to the hilt defend that this is the better directed film.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You piss off. This is so much better directed. Are you serious?
I am going to give so much credit to Dazed in these next categories, like legitimately. But I didn't even think that this would be close. The fact that you went given the victory to is shocking to me. I'm shocked, Cotton.
For 1,000 reasons, I think this is better directed. I think this captures the spirit of a genuine and authentic high school moment better. It doesn't feel as constructed, which is what I will say its strength is. And if you want to tell me that ending shot with the open road ahead of them while Slow Ride is playing is not so brilliant and beautiful, I will say you're no longer a movie fan.
Whoa! Hold on.
Yeah.
Again,
yeah.
I'm not saying that Dazed isn't a great film. I'm not saying that there's not great shots in it. And I do agree with you. I think the ending is quite nice. I also appreciate
nice!
I also appreciate it when Linklater just openly stole the opening from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, ew, no. First off, you want to be real? Every high school movie is stealing that from the documentary that came out in the 60s called High School that did that exact thing. So they're both stealing. Ha! But I'll say, all right, you do bring up a good point because there's a similarity at which that happens. I also think that, and this is where I think the opposition of these films can really come into play, is in the directing. Because the writing, I think, again, clear winner here. But I think with the directing, it's also like what you're buying in for, because there is a grime or a graininess, I would say, because I wouldn't say it's actually feel like it was grimy, but like kind of a sun-bleached aspect to how Dazed and Confused is conceived. There's kind of there's a spirit around this film. I mean, so Richard Linklater, so he brings down all of these famous actors. He makes them live in one hotel all together. Except Matthew McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey did not live in the hotel because he already had a ranch in Austin. So he had no reason to live at the hotel. And if you read the book, All Right, by Melissa Merritz, this goes into a lot of like kind of the atmosphere that Linklater created. I mean, they essentially talk about, the cast discussed, like it was like summer camp for the entire time that they were making this film. And everything that you can imagine probably would have occurred with these actors all, at the burgeoning moment of their careers taking off, or, maybe we didn't know that their careers were going to take off yet, but these are heavy hitters, no pun intended, with some of the action in Dazed and Confused. Everything you think happened. There were a lot of relationships born of this. There was a secret marriage born of this. Like, he created an atmosphere and then distilled that and focused it into this film for it to feel as natural as possible. And to me, the thing that clinches this for Best Director, the moment Wooderson walks into that pool hall and Hurricane is playing, and it just slows for a moment, and your boy Wes Anderson's been ripping this off ever since, and it just slows for a moment. Is there anything, I'm going to give my one F word, is there anything fucking cooler than that moment?
It is a very cool moment. I was going to talk about this during the soundtrack, but I have to ask you, though, has there ever been a cooler use of a song and a more inappropriate use of a song than using the song Hurricane for just a slow walk for an entirely white film of characters walking
I hate
into a
you so
pool
much.
hall?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Because it is. It's this, and this is where...
Maybe Zack Snyder using Zombie at the end of his Army of the Dead movie.
Dude, right? How inappropriate is the use of that film?
Listen,
or use that song in that film?
I learned about the song Hurricane from this movie, and I agree with you. It is a amazing shot. It is the coolest shot of the film. But it's like, when you know the song Hurricane, and what it's about and everything and what it means, and especially in this day and age and everything, it doesn't...
It's kind of like, us using in our senior slideshow the song Freshman. Because the song said freshman.
Right, yeah.
Like, I completely get it's so this is where I'll say not to bring Cameron Crowe back into flow. Cameron Crowe, something he's very good and I think is a master at, and Quentin Tarantino the same. Using songs to their best application. Linklater uses that purely for its sonic value. And for its sonic value, you're right. It hits in that moment. For its thematic subject, no, 100%. That's not when that song should be used.
I've never thought about it. I was watching it.
Cool. Thanks for ruining that moment that I have loved for so long. I appreciate it. But you're not wrong. You are not
Still
wrong.
awesome. I mean, it's an amazing song, and it's a cool moment.
Throw in here. Tell me how Fast Times is well directed.
So you got the great Amy Heckerling. She was 29 years old when she directed this film. Cameron Crowe was, by the way, 24, I believe, when he wrote this. So,
okay.
She had hoped to have her first film done by 24 because Orson Welles had Citizen Kane, but the writer's strike caused everything to be delayed. So she ends up getting this. She wasn't the first choice, however.
Oh, actually, I don't know this.
Do you know who the legitimate? And this isn't even like they were talked about, like they got brought in.
Who?
David Lynch. So,
I'm going to let you know, we see a lot more of that clinic scene if David Lynch directs it.
David Lynch was brought in to direct this. Like, he met with Crowe, he met with the producers, he drove, he sat there, he listened to them, and this has been, like, proven. And just at the very end, just looks at Cameron Crowe and says, looks like you have a really nice movie here. This is definitely not something I do. And said, good luck. And literally got up, walked out, got into his car, and drove off.
Added to the many list of reasons I love David Lynch.
Yeah. No, Amy Heckerling, she's had, we talked about this a lot in Clueless, so I'm not going to, give a whole, huge thing with her, but she's just really interesting. She has a very interesting career. I think this is the highlight, though, because I'll give you this. You have moments in Dazed that are, the way that they're shot and the way that they're directed are very cool. They're, if you're going to watch a montage or you're going to watch these snippets, what she does with this film, though, is she brings something in that you hadn't seen up to that point, and I don't know how many high school films really do now. The sex scene with Stacy, with the radio salesman, is a really well done scene. She shows you the awkwardness of that first moment, and with knowing how to flash on the graffiti, and then she puts the point of view on the gentleman at times, and you see it where you don't see that often, where it's from the point of view of the female, and she just does this throughout, where she handles some of the subject matter that I don't know we see in a lot of different films. So she has a way that, again, it's not going to be those super flashy moments that we're going to get with Dazed that are these cool moments. It's more in some of these subtle moments that she has. Again, and not to jump on this, I think the pool house scene with Stacy, and when you hear about how that was actually this was supposed to be a little bit grittier and grimier of a film. She was very adamant that these are middle class to just on the just below middle class kids, working their butts off. She didn't want the mall to look as shined up as it was. She wanted a bit of a more run down mall. This mall was only 2 years old when they shot there. She had to do, you hear this a lot with mall scenes, but they had to shoot overnight. It was a working mall. So just some of these aspects that she brings into it that I don't think we see a lot. The way that they handle Linda throughout the film, of this character that, she's trying to be something she's not, she wants to be respected and she wants to be older, and she's doing everything that she can, and in different hands that character is exploited. There's some subject, there are spots in this film that are and I'm going to talk about the three most awkward scenes to talk about, but I think are the three of the best scenes that are directed. The Brad and Linda scene. is the juxtaposition of what's, when they're dropping out of Brad's fantasy of what's happening, and just her getting out of the pool and fixing her ear, and coming in, and just how that all is shot. I just admire so much. And no, it's not because of it's considered one of the top nude scenes of all time. You when you step away from that moment of it, like, and take that out of your head, like, it is a really interesting way of this juxtaposition between males and where they're at that age, and females, and what's reality and what's not reality. I just really like some of the nuances that she puts into this film.
No, and listen, I can't disagree with the things you said there, because you're right. You're talking about the scenes, and some that are more, like, obviously the Phoebe Cates scene is very, very well known for that particular reason, not the reason you highlighted. And I will give the credit here to Amy Heckerling. I think she understood that female sexuality and the confusion that comes at that time in your life, and the unfortunate, particularly what happens with, like, the radio repair guy, like, kind of the exploitation of him not her lying, but him not really trying to investigate really how old she is, and that happens, and kind of the awkwardness of her, that scene, and then but also, like, what she hopes it to be, or what she hopes for, because it's a grimy scene. It's like he takes her to a baseball diamond. Like, this is not a good dude. Yeah. Like, and then later what happens with Damone, I think often, what this shows in, and I think what the character of Linda is trying to communicate, is the way in which, like, as young women, very, very unfortunately, so much of, I think, the content that comes out in teen movies subjugates that, well, female sexuality is bad, and something to be wary of, and giving away your treasure. And I think what Amy Heckerling has talked about, like, no, as much as Brad is doing that in the pool house because he has urges and fantasies, so do these young women, and recognize that and deal with it. And for a movie in the 80s, now, I don't know if everyone approaches the subject matter that way. And that might be some of my discomfort when watching Fast Times, because I think it's a more unfiltered, but then it's, to me, I think this is where I've always had this, like, cognitive dissonance of, it's this unfiltered, but then it's still in this movie that functions very much like a high school teen movie. And I think that's sometimes the hardship I have with Fast Times. But isn't that high school? No, I'm not saying it's not, but I think what I like, and why I think that Dazed is a better directed film, is there's a consistency to tone and vision and handling that I appreciate. Fast Times is dealing with heavier stuff. There's no two ways about it. Like, there is, and because it's being told across a year, you have more time to, like, unpack.
There's a lot to definitely dissect in that difference between the two films.
And I think the difference sometimes, and why I would, like, lean towards, obviously, Dazed and Confused being the better directed film, and maybe we'll have to end this in a draw, I don't know, is that there's such different purposes in what type of story this is trying to tell. Like, to me, when I watch Dazed and Confused, it's slice of night, it's one night, and we get to just kind of, like, float in and out of everybody's life. And I love that feeling, because it feels naturalistic. It feels like a fly on the wall. It's very, like, it's very voyeur. Like, it's cool to me. Fast Times, because it functions in more of a traditional, like, linear narrative standpoint of telling a high school year, which is, like, pretty typical in, like, teen films, I think then what you get is something that's a lot more structured, which could be a mark for Heckerling, but something I don't think I emotionally respond to as well.
Right, but are you saying that you're not responding to the film as opposed to the direction of the film? Because I think what she's able to do is really, you are talking about the fact that she has to tell this story over the course of the year. And again, nothing gets bogged down. This is a tight hour-and-a-half film. And, she does a fantastic job of allowing this to grow throughout, and every character and what their growth is as a person throughout, and kind of, like, navigating these scenes.
But I don't know if everyone's growth is shown as equitably as you're saying. I think there are some characters in this, and again, I'm just going to pause here to say, I love Fast Times at Ridgemont High, because you're looking at me like you're coming from a baby.
No. I think I was surprised on this category, because I would argue that And I'll just say it. I mean, I've been kind of skirting around it. I don't think Linklater's direction is that great. I think the strengths of this film are its cast and its cast chemistry, which we're going to get to probably in the next category. It might be a good time to actually move on. We're going to call this one a draw.
I'm going to call this a you're wrong.
I'm going to, I'm putting this one under protest.
We'll call it a draw.
But moving into the next category is cast chemistry, right? Now I'm going to jump that ahead. I think we were going to do story next, but let's go right into cast chemistry because I believe that Fast Time's total strength is an amazing cast and how they work together, and how they gel and how those characters gel together.
But here's the thing. I feel like you're saying it in a reductive way that counters the direction.
Yes.
To say that it's
absolutely.
not... Okay.
I'm completely saying that Linklater does not deserve the credit for the success of this film.
You're entirely wrong. You and I have watched many things where we've said, wow, that director got a performance out of someone. He did with this. He crafted an experience, and that experience meant cultivating a cast and putting them in the conditions to garner these performances and knowing when to push in the direction of something that felt structured and when to pull and let it be organic. That is an incredibly astute director that can create that kind of chemistry. I think we often think about cast chemistry as though it's just this thing that happens if you get beautiful, talented people in a room and it
No.
I'm not saying you personally. Yeah. I'm saying generally. I think that's something that we can think when we see actors interacting in a way that seems convivial and friendly and almost as though their bonds have gone beyond just the work. I think sometimes we think that it just happens immediately. And yes, of course, sometimes it does. It's like if you have people that you work with in your job that you're close with versus people that you're not, but you just work well with. And I think what Linklater does in this environment, which again I will say is a credit to his direction, is he creates the space for that to occur. And I think you have actors who, it's really interesting because this cast comes from so many different walks of life that they're coming into this space. It's written about very profoundly about Parker Posey kind of being a central figure in this cast. If you think about the character of Darla, she has a very big moment at the beginning. Yeah. Air raid, bitches. She's got that at the beginning. And then she fades into the background a little bit, and then you get that great scene, to me, Parker Posey and Joey Lauren Adams in that moment of no, just tell us what she said. We don't care. We won't get mad. And then Joey Lauren Adams getting so angry. And they talk about this. I guess Parker Posey and Joey Lauren Adams became fast friends. At first they kind of hated each other a little bit, and then they became fast friends on set. But Parker Posey kind of ruled over all, very larger than life personality. They talk about her almost to me in Norma Desmond terms, just this big kind of almost diva, but not selfish, but just would do kind of insane things. So you bring in kind of her creative spirit that's coming, she was raised in the South, at this point was living in New York, and you bring all of these pieces together, someone like Ben Affleck and Cole Hauser and then Matthew McConaughey, and you bring them together, and there's this kind of magical thing happens where these people seem to interact like they've known each other all of high school, as though part of their life is that Wooderson's been bumming around at the pool hall their entire youth. And so, and moving more into the cast chemistry, I just think there's something magical about how the people of Dazed and Confused interact. I think 100%, and I know we'll get to this, Fast Times has some iconic characters. One in particular that it's going to be really hard to argue against that shouldn't potentially win that category. But what I love so much about the characters in this is I feel like there's a real sense that they have lived in the same town together for years. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing that happens in this film.
I don't argue any of that. I agree completely with you. I think, yes, you're right in that Linklater, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic in that he had nothing to do with it. Obviously, he had a lot to do with it. He deserves a lot of the credit. But I don't think the strength is by any means in the direction. I don't think that there are a lot of particularly amazing shots throughout and everything, but I do think
disagree. How the whole entire Moon Tower party is shot is beautiful.
But I do think
that takes a talented cinematographer too.
The cast, there's no arguing in Dazed. That cast is brilliant together. They got the right people for the right parts. The way that it's spread out throughout, I'm 100% behind you. I mean, you got lightning in a bottle with McConaughey, who would obviously just build this iconic part. I think the interesting thing is, and why his name's escaping me, Ben Affleck's character, O'Banion, is throughout, like, is that character, I'm curious what that character feels like if it's not Ben Affleck today, if it's just, like, Mitch, the kid that plays Mitch, we don't really know him as an actor today, other than he played Mitch.
You can't see it, but I'm grabbing my nose as he says Mitch's name.
Oh, God. Mitch is so bad.
So bad! He's the only part where I'm like, Ryan will win the whole argument if he kee's bringing up Mitch Kramer. Yeah. But I'll say the O'Banion thing is really funny because Ben Affleck, like, he loves being associated with Dazed and Confused. And he's very fond about this, although he said he didn't really get to date anyone when he was down there, which he was super bummed about. He does not love when people bring up custom-made paddles to him.
Oh, really?
Because he's like, you clearly don't know me at all. I don't endorse that kind of behavior. I'm not that character. Now, granted, current things going on with his buddy Matt Damon, it's a little hard. But he said, he was like, no, he was
Boston
like...
boys.
No, but he said, like, the bullying stuff he found, like, so objectionable, but he so wanted to be in this film. But he said it was really hard because of the fact that he's, like, the person on play, he's like so, like, yeah. He was so an objection to and thought he was, like, so disgusting.
I think, in argument or in defense of Fast Times with this, though, is I will say, you're right. I'm not going to argue that the chemistry is going to be better in Dazed.
You mean better in Fast Times?
No, I think it's better in Dazed.
Oh, okay,
I'll
you do
say
that. Okay,
outright.
okay. Yeah.
No. I'm going to say that outright.
Yeah.
But I also think, though, there's not to be, the chemistry is really wonderful in Fast Times. Those the way that they seamlessly kind of drift in and out of each other, either quickly or not quickly. To me, Brad and Stacy is one of the best brother and sister relationships I see in film. I love the two of them together.
The scene at the car feels incredibly genuine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you feel that moment. There's not a lot said there, but you feel that moment with them. You understand, Brad is being a protective brother, but also being an amazing brother in just letting her have her moment and letting her grow. Despite how, tough of a situation it is. I think Rat and I think Damone, I think the way that they play off of each other, and then Damone and Stacy, and I love how they all weave in and out. And I can see you making a face, and I can't disagree more. I think this film, again, it's a great ensemble piece. It's a great ensemble cast that they all work together. There's one character that doesn't fit in the film to me. And he's probably the most iconic character from the movie because he feels like he's not in the same movie as the rest of the cast. And that is not something I'm making up. Once I started doing some research on this, he really was supposed to be more of a small character that the studio didn't know how to do this film. Promote this film. Sure. They had no faith in it. Universal Studios had no faith in it. They saw the stuff. They didn't understand a film that could talk from the female and the male perspective of high school and talk about it in a gritty way. They thought they were getting this, goofy, funny comedy.
And Fast Times is not.
You're right.
And
I think,
not.
And again, talking about the Spicoli character, if we talk about him, if you remove Spicoli from this film is probably more of a drama than it is a comedy. Spicoli brings the humor to the film. And I'm not saying I dislike the Spicoli character. I love Spicoli. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a few minutes, and we'll have a lot to say about that. But he does feel a little out of place at times in the tone of the film compared to the other characters.
So I'm going to say two things. One, I believe I'm with you. The character of Mark Ratner, completely authentic. And I think he has a really good presence, and I think occupies a high school student's insecurities very well. I have always felt the character of Damone is a little false, a little put upon. And I know the argument made, well, that's supposed to be kind of Damone, but I never feel like his character authentically fits as much in the film. And what you're saying about Spicoli, I can't disagree. And that actually makes a lot of sense now with you saying, like, Universal kind of not knowing. There's actually a very similar story. Universal, it really didn't want Dazed and Confused to be made, and they fought Linklater on everything.
So Universal, terrible.
Terrible. They have no foresight.
Well, they actually went back and filmed the surf scene later. That was a whole added scene.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because it's so goofy. It's so goofy and out of place. And not in the way like Brad's fantasy leads to a moment of intense awkwardness. The Spicoli moment doesn't really lead anywhere, so it kind of makes sense that they didn't do much with it. But I'll actually say, like, my heart breaks for Spicoli when I watch the movie. I hate Mr. Hand. I think Mr. Hand is a terrible human being. I would never conduct myself that way as an educator. And I actually think a few of those maybe goofier moments were I think there's actually a lot of heart to the Spicoli character, which I'm going to give Amy Heckerling credit for, because how she directs Sean Penn to kind of have those moments, because when Mr. Hand's mean to him, you can see it, like, he gets mad sometimes, but sometimes it looks like it kind of hurts his feelings. And I give Sean Penn every credit for giving what could have been, and I think was marketed as a one-off kind of stoner funny character. There's a little bit more going on with Spicoli.
I agree with you. I think you see that. But I think that's all these characters, right? Like, that's what they're going through. The whole film, it's the title of the film, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Cameron Crowe talks about the title, and he said it signified two things specifically on why it was named this. So it's Fast Times of kids' lives. Like, they grow up so quickly, and it goes past so fast. So that's obviously there.
Sure.
And then the other aspect of it is the fast times of their lives with the jobs and trying to be adults early and trying to, kind of get through as much of the limited time before going out into the world, and they're trying to find this place. And I think Spicoli is that too. He's a guy that's trying to find his place in the world, right? He's trying to have fun. He's trying to live life, but I kind of say that, and he does. There's more to him than just the joke. But I also think, though, because he becomes so comedic, he's a little bit different in the tone, and that is one reason why I think, the chemistry probably is a little more seamless with Linklater's Dazed than it is here.
Well, and you're talking about, like, you bring up what Cameron Crowe says, like, the fast times of their life. It's almost like Linklater's like, let's slow this down and go in with a magnifying glass to their lives. So it's very different in their purposes, like, from what you present of what Crowe's saying versus what Linklater says he wanted to accomplish with Dazed.
But it's funny, and that's the one thing, we talked about how I think, we both said it after we watched both movies, essentially back to back, and the one thing, we don't talk a lot before we do the show, but one of the things we both agreed was, these movies aren't as similar as people make them out, and they're not as similar as we thought they were. Like, it, but until you watch them literally back to back, you don't realize it.
Well, and I think we had this joke, too, about this debate. So we had so situated them in our minds this way.
But I think in the end, they both have essentially the same theme, right?
Yeah.
Kids that are trying to understand their place in the world and, kind of living by other people's rules and where that is taking them in the next stage that they're about to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a theme in most high school films. I mean, again, American Graffiti is exactly the same thing. So...
yeah. Just living.
Yeah.
L-I-V-I-N.
So I'll give you cast chemistry because I cannot deny, the chemistry between Pink and his friends. I love.
Oh, it feels like they've been like playing around with each other since elementary. Like,
I love the scene with them, even just small, when they're talking to Mitch and they're like trying to get Mitch to be able to go home with the girl and trying to help him out, but just like how they play off. You can see, like, and I think he tried to recapture that with, that movie a couple of years ago. Everybody Wants Some, that was just not there.
Because it felt like a recreation of something that he captured at a very specific moment, and I think what you're bringing up, too, I would say, like, one of the, to me, some of the most genuine relationships there are Mike, Tony, and Cynthia. Like, I feel like I knew Mike, Tony, and Cynthia. I may have been Cynthia at some point.
Props to Marissa Ripsey,
Right?
I think she's so good in this movie.
She's phenomenal. Just like how she reacts to like when Wooderson like hits on her and like how they talk about it. And like in many ways, like I love that Mike and Tony and Cynthia kind of become like the moral voices of the film. But like I love the notion of, because I think this rings so true, the hyper intellectuals in high school that understand that part of life is having experiences, but are so intellectual they've not been having experiences, and the need to go out and do that and what that looks like when they finally do. Mike getting in a fight, Tony making out with a girl that's younger than him, her wanting to go home with Wooderson. Like, it all feels like, I don't know, there's so much authenticity to those three and how they interact with each other.
I totally agree. You know, and I might give you a little bit of some kind of where I'm going to be moving here on, but like something we had a category we decided to drop off, and it was, I had put down secondary characters, and you're like, oh, I don't think we need that. And I was like, I don't even remember why I put that, but I actually had come up to me as we've been talking what that was about, and it's actually a credit probably to Linkletter of this, and something again I give a lot more credit to Dazed as opposed to Fast Times, is there's a lot more going on in the background.
Yes, there is.
And that's something that I really love about Dazed. Fast Times, what you're watching is in front of you, and you're taking in that moment, and you know the focus is what the focus is. You can have a ball with watching Dazed and just watching side characters in the background and things that are going on. It's really quite remarkable.
Well, what Linkletter did for that is they paid for extras that were local young people in Austin, Texas, who were high school students.
Some local youths.
But literally, the production team had to go to the actors and say, this is Texas. They're underage. Their daddies have shotguns. Don't go near the extras. Like, legitimately, because they were like, there's a very different vibe down here.
I'm just going to say, my film, which is central theme is around sex, seems to be less sexed up than your film from a production standpoint.
Oh, you're not wrong. And if you read anything about this movie, it feels genuine to that.
So, okay, so then I think we need to talk a little bit about story. This
is rough, dude.
I mean, there's no real story to Dazed, right? Well, you're in agreement there.
It's a truer story than Fast Times. I told you we were going to fight during this episode.
What's rough, then? Why did you say it was rough?
Because here's the hard thing. I think that I can evaluate that something I really appreciate is certainly very much in the style of American Graffiti, is something that feels like we are moving through this night with these young people with their varying desires. One of the things I really appreciate about about Dazed is I think Randall Pink Floyd is like kind of positioned as the main character, but kind of isn't either. Like, he has a storyline that runs through, but it's all of these different vignettes of people who are kind of converge at the Moon Tower. You've got the kind of nerdy intellectuals from the high school. You've got, seemingly the mean girls. You've got the guys on the football team. You've got these like freshmen who are trying to get like initiated in the high school life. You've got your stoners. You've got kind of like this kind of all of these stories kind of converging. And what I really appreciate that from a storytelling standpoint is I feel like that really sings to something I want to see, because I like seeing that convergence at the Moon Tower. And other than the fight that happens, nothing like super dramatic happens up there. It's just kind of like this is a normal night. It's not really building to anything. It's just about, all right, the kegger couldn't be delivered because the parents stayed home, so let's just party at the Moon Tower, and then it's just about kind of some people getting to have the fruition of what they hope the night would be, and then, you have Pink, makes out with Jody, but he kind of has a girlfriend, but nothing really dramatic happens. It all just kind of, sizzles out, and the sun comes up, and everybody goes home. Here is what I'll say, and I don't like this. I like that kind of story. That story sings to me. I don't need some major denouement. I just need kind of a story and life happening. However, from a story standpoint, obviously Fast Times at Ridgemont High tells a tighter story in that particular way.
Yeah.
Okay, don't say yeah like that.
No, I mean...
Stylistically, they're so different.
Dazed is amazing with its characters. You have these fantastic characters throughout, and they have these great lines, and they play off of each other well, and you feel like you are at this party with them. You feel like you're traveling along with them, right? Like, you feel like you're in the party. But I don't know, there is literally no change in these characters by the end of the film. They are the same characters we get at the beginning, and they're the same characters we get at the end. And I think that's a credit. I agree with you. I think that that's nice. We don't always need that. But from a storytelling standpoint, it's no contest because, again, none of these characters grow at all.
But I think that's a simplistic way of looking at this. Like, I don't think growth has to mean storytelling. I think progression of revealing something that feels relatable and feels true can be just as much storytelling without showing growth. Like, I don't think you need that. I think 100% something that I love about Fast Times is that particularly with, Jennifer Jason Leigh's character.
Stacey.
Thank you, Stacey. Like, with Stacey and kind of everything that she goes through and kind of the subtle changes we see are going to happen to her. You know, I have some problems with some of the development of Stacey's character. Some things I wish had happened towards the end cap of that story that I think would have brought her character to a more complex fruition from a storytelling standpoint. But I agree that you see more growth in those characters, but I don't think that necessarily has to, like, completely demean that their story, a really great story being told in Dazed and Confused. It's just a very different kind of story.
But I don't want that, again, to come across. Sometimes, you know, when you have a difference of opinion, we talk about this a lot, it comes across like you're being harsh. I'm not putting Dazed down.
Oh, no, I don't think you are.
But I will say, again, why I will choose Fast Times between if I had one to go on my desert island, you choose one. I'm gonna take Fast Times.
You're really taking Fast Times over Dazed and Confused?
Oh yeah.
Ew.
Fast Times plays like a documentary. Like, I feel like I am traveling.
Dazed and Confused plays like a documentary. Fast Times plays like a very elevated teenager movie.
No, not at all. It is.
Completely. It does not play like a documentary.
That's the beauty of this movie. I think, again, one thing Linklater has in his, I'll save that in a minute when we talk about soundtrack, and I'll bring that point up. But Crow, what he was trying to write here was, that adolescence and turmoil is important. Like, he wasn't trying to exploit any of these, kids, but he's also showing the humor side. Like, as he put it, kids like to have fun. And I think that's why we talk about it's more of a drama with some funny aspects to it, because it feels more realistic. And I feel like all of these characters, again, this film was done in 1982. I was 2 years old at the time, so no, I didn't go through high school at that time. But I can still say now, as a 41-year-old, that I know those characters, and I knew those characters in high school, and when the first time I seen this film, and they resonate. And I love that we get an entire year, and all of the characters, to me, we follow and we see. And not everybody, I agree, grows in a positive way, but I think...
And I don't think everyone grows in your film.
I think that... Mark and Stacy are obviously the two central characters, and then they have these two older friends that are trying to guide them through and almost, I don't want to say it like this, but almost take these two lame friends under their wing so they can almost have an authority figure over them and almost have this, and they follow and they try to guide them, and then these two kids who are coming into high school for the first time have to learn the world and what they're trying to do. And I just don't think that we get a character like Stacy in any other high school films. I think Mark is really well done. You know, he's not the most well acted character, and I think that's what, you know, probably is a little bit of my negative shot at it. But I think the character and what we see him go through and how he's trying to he's a good guy, and he's trying to keep that and not be somebody different. And still find his way. And then you have, like you talked about, Spicoli and what he kind of figures out in the world. Like, there are just, and we see this through the course of the year. I even like some of the characters like why is his name escaping me? Forrest Whitaker. I in all of my paper shuffling, I lost my character name. I'll just call him Tommy. No, he's not Tommy, but he, you know, I like what they do with him. He's supposed to be kind of on the outskirts. We're not supposed to know a lot about him. Charles, thank you. Yeah. You know, we're not supposed to know a lot about him, but we see kind of how he's used throughout the film and used throughout the school, that everybody kind of puts him in a box.
Well, and I think they make, like, kind of a mythical story about him, like he gets flown in to play on the team and stuff like that.
And we see Brad be put through the ringer throughout, and you have this guy that's on top of the world going into his senior year, and he thinks it's going to be everything, and you just kind of, you know, where other films, like, he just is beat down as it goes, but it's all done in such a natural, understanding way. Like, I feel so bad. Brad, everything that goes wrong with Brad is because of Arnold. You know, he tries to bring Arnold in to where he's at. He's the king of the fast food place. And Arnold, you know, lays them out to hanging up dry, and everything goes wrong from there. And him just trying, you know, I made you watch a deleted scene the other night, and I think that deleted scene was great, about him going to his guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor explaining to him essentially, like, you don't be a slacker and just have fun. And he's like, I'm working my butt off every day, because you're supposed to think that Stacy and Brad don't come from well-to-do family. Like, he's got to work for everything that he's got, and you just feel this heartbreak for him as he just keeps getting beat down, and then he finally gets that moment at the end to feel worthwhile. And I like that. I like all these characters, and I don't even think it's, again, like, I hate trying to make it such like a, you know, fighting type way, but, like, I feel like it's not even close. It's a knockout for Fast Times.
And, you know, and obviously on the other side of it, I heartily disagree. I don't disagree with the things you said. I think there is a missing piece to the Stacy character that I think is not the fault of Cameron Crowe or Amy Heckerling, but I think is the fault of filmmaking at the time. I think that character written now in an environment where female stories, and there's still a lot of work to go, are being more embraced. I think that film features much more prominently on Stacy in a way that really dives into the things that happen to her and occur. I give Jennifer Jason Leigh a lot of credit because I think she does some of that work without it being written on the page. But in storytelling, they're very different stories to me. To me, the characters of Dazed and Confused feel incredibly genuine. I didn't go to school in Texas. Well, not high school anyways. I know those characters. I know people just like that. And I didn't go to school in the 70s either. So I think what I appreciate about both stories is they distill, I think, different versions of high school experiences and different kind of growth. Because, you know, you have, as you pointed out, you've got Stacy, who's in her sophomore year of high school, you know, trying to come into her own, trying to figure out what that is. And that self-discovery is really important. I think where Dazed and Confused is obviously very different is it's not showing growth. It's kind of showing wants and needs and, like, these people at these very specific moments in time in their, like, high school career, but that also feel incredibly relatable. People who are going into their senior year, people who are going into high school for the first time, and what that exactly means. You know, the hierarchies that come. You know, Richard Linklater, he based the air raid sequences and the paddle sequences, those actually happened to him in high school. It actually happened on his baseball team, the air raid thing, and it was, as he quoted, which is really funny because I think it's Mike who says it in the film, it was sanctioned by the town. People from the town would come out and watch the air raids that they would do to the freshman girls. And he said, like, this is something he, you know, wanted to capture because it was just this insane thing that would happen. And no, those things didn't happen to me in high school. But, you know, the things in Fast Times at Ridgemont High didn't come. But, you know, there is some universality, even when you didn't live in those spaces, if you knew people who were like that, or you knew those kind of experiences, or if nothing else, you knew the emotions. And what I love about Dazed and Confused is that Dazed and Confused shows all that hopefulness you enter high school with of what this could potentially be like. And what if it comes to fruition in a night? Or, a character like O'Banion is actually a very interesting case study. I knew someone like O'Banion in high school that acted tough and was accepted by his social group, but also kind of hated by his social group. Like, that really weird person. And honestly, I think there are layers to O'Banion. Like, I think he's brutal because he knows he's not accepted. He knows, so he has to kind of overcompensate for that. I love the character of Wooderson. I think there's a very cynical way of looking at Wooderson, but I think Linklater treats him with a lot of cool, probably because it was Matthew McConaughey playing him. So from a story standpoint, where I'm going to call this a draw is this. I don't think our stories are the same. I know you think you win this one, and I think I win this one, and I think we're both arguing it well, but I don't think at the end, I think our desire for the types of stories we're looking for are what are hampering either of us from actually winning this argument, because you're looking for something different than I am, and our films support what we're looking for.
So I think kind of getting off of story and moving on to one of our next categories, and probably a category we'll both agree on, and there's probably not a lot of debate on this one. I won't lie, so we're going to talk about soundtrack, right? Both of these films are heavily talked about with their soundtrack. I honestly thought I would think that this was a little bit closer than it was until I really went back and rewatched the movie and looked at both soundtracks. But both movies the music is important to both, right? So it's hard not to talk about that. Obviously, and we talk a lot about Crow. Crow is so huge with his music, and he was so influential in the music in this film.
So he did have say?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if he did. I know you referenced earlier that
yes.
he was involved in production. I was curious if the soundtrack came in.
In my, half-ass internet research for my rewatchable fans, what I'm understanding correctly is, yes, he actually helped curate a lot of original songs for this film and got a lot of, so he used a lot of his resources. Now, one notable blunder in the movie, obviously they which was the Led Zeppelin song, they dropped the ball on, because Damone tells him to make sure that he puts on Led Zeppelin 4.
Oh, that's right.
And it comes back with Kashmir.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
So they had that filmed, but then they couldn't get the rights to that.
Oh, that's right. Can I tell you, I thought it always just played like Mark didn't know what he was talking about.
And that's why it works. Yeah, so if you know the background, that's the song plays because they couldn't get the rights. But Emmy Heckerlin and them all went, it kind of just shows that Mark flubs it, right? So it still works from
he does so good with
story standpoint.
He does so good with that date. He tries so hard.
I know we moved on a little bit from direction, but yeah. I think the scene with them at the house is done, and them trying to talk to each other where they're both at different spots. Him having Damone in his head and overthinking everything.
Yeah.
The shot at their feet of what's going on. It's telling the whole story about what's going on in their head as opposed to what's going on in their body language. Just really good stuff there.
When he looks back at the door.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And the light goes off. Oh.
So listen,
that feels very real.
I'm gonna say the couple of credits that I give here, and then we'll come back. I'll finish up the soundtrack because I'll let you talk in length about Dazed's soundtrack here. Somebody's Baby, to me, Jackson Browne, is such the song from this movie. It should be called Stacy's Song.
Wouldn't that be cool if it was?
Yeah, so good. But and you can't deny though the great opening with the Go-Go's
yes,
going around the mall and introducing these characters, and how that Go-Go song just plays really well. And then you get to the another shot then with the montage of the high school and introducing all the characters again at the high school and where they kind of play with American Girl by Tom Petty. So such great music, a lot of great music. But I'll let you go because I'm not going to deny that Dazed has the better soundtrack. But when you're done, I do have one thing I want to say about it.
Oh, I'm really intrigued what that is. It's funny. So obviously we knew this was going to be in debate format. And when I was writing down the categories, I wasn't sure which way a lot of things would go because obviously I knew we were going to, you know, kind of come ready to argue kind of our points. And one of the first things I wrote in my notes after you gave me the categories, I wrote, Tuesday's gone, argument over.
Yeah.
And I was like, he can't argue that my soundtrack's better.
Dude, I can't. I mean, no, not at all. Love Hurts, Tuesday's Gone. I used to listen to that soundtrack a lot in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Cherry Bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, Slow Ride's fantastic. But even at that, I would say probably, and I love the song Tuesday's Gone. It's one of my, like, and I can say it kind of like ranks up there in some of my favorite songs. And I was like, it just feels like it really can kind of capture a moment and like a vibe. It's a very specific vibe. Like you're happy, but you're nostalgic, but you're kind of melancholic. Like, I don't know, it just captures a lot of vibes. Linklater, this was one of the fiercest battles he had with Universal Studios. Universal Studios at this time was twin filming Schindler's List and Jurassic Park. So they had really, like, Richard, but they had also had prior to that a bunch of commercial flops. So the hold that they put on him for the amount of money he was allowed to have and how long he could film was really, really tight. And this was, I forget what the percentage is. I want to say it was something ridiculous, like 70% of the film's budget went to the music rights. Because
not shocking.
He really wanted to capture, and he had created a 4-sided mixtape of songs that he wanted included in the film. A lot of them made it. There's a few songs in here that I really wish had made it, just because they're great songs. One in particular, so he had on his list that he wanted Bruce Springsteen's 10th Avenue Freeze Out. And I love that song so much. That song does not fit in the world of Dazed and Confused. It's not a Dazed and Confused song. I love that song. I want it in here, but no at the same time.
Do you know, speaking of Springsteen, did you know Bruce Springsteen's sister is in Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Yes, I did, actually. Which is kind of crazy, like, because it's not
so
like...
If anybody doesn't know, so Pamela Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen's sister, is one of the cheerleaders in the gymnasium.
Yeah, which it's just, like, kind of fantastic, like, those little, like, kind of stories, and certainly there's a lot with, like, the cast itself, but just that there's someone there. One song I do really wish made it from his listing is David Bowie's Golden Years. I think Golden Years would have fit really well. I actually think that's probably what Wooderson should have entered the pool hall with that playing instead. Probably would have been more appropriate. But it's such a great soundtrack, like... And I remember, and even in my notes, I was like, this movie starts with sweet emotion. How can you not pick this as one of the best soundtracks of all time? And there's just, now, and I will say, I am not a music aficionado. If there is anachronistic uses of songs, I am not aware. This is supposed to be set on the last day of school in 76. Some of this might not match up, so I apologize if I'm not pointing that stuff out.
Point of order.
Go.
Actually, something I actually want to say, and you said that, it's a good timing for me to point out one thing. One small defense of my film here, Fast Time.
I wouldn't say that Fast Times has a bad soundtrack. It has
a
very good soundtrack.
It's a very good soundtrack.
Yes.
They don't compare. The one thing, though, I'll give the Linklater has an advantage over, and this is something that we were talking about as direction and story and things like that. Linklater made a film in 1992 set in 1976. So he was able to curate classic songs. Fast Times is a film made in 1982 about 1982 and using original songs and songs of the time. So the fact that Fast Times, is still that good and still to this day, kind of holds up from that soundtrack standpoint. And even I think it's huge, just something to think about. So I think it does give a lot of credit to Fast Times from that end of it. And nothing against Linklater. He used great music. And
used it well.
Yeah. But there is a little bit of an easier time to use music that you already know are classic hits that are going to knock it out of the park.
No, 100%. Like, and that's a really important thing because you can be reflective of what of the songs feel like that time. And certainly Linklater got to be, reflective about his own time in the 70s, thinking about the songs that meant something to him. You have School's Out by Alice Cooper. You brought up Love Hurts. You've got Lowrider. you know, there's just you got Foghat, I Just Want to Make Love to You. Like, there's so many good stuff.
I can't hear Foghat without
the Jim Carrey hair.
And he was on the MTV Movie Awards one year.
Does anyone in here want to listen to some Foghat?
Yeah, so.
Oh, yeah. There's a very interesting exclusion that he wasn't able to get the rights for. And oddly enough, it's a Led Zeppelin song. The song Dazed and Confused.
That's funny.
Which was not included, is listed on his track list. And again, cannot say this enough. I'm not done with it yet. But the Melissa Merritt's book, All Right, it's like kind of a definitive history of the film of this, or the filmmaking process of this. Highly recommend checking it out. There's so many gem stories in here. But his original track list is one of those gems that's in here.
And yeah, Dazed wins. The fact that we just bought the vinyl a couple weeks ago and not the Fast Times vinyl is enough said.
Can I say something? And I know this is going to sound like really odd. The vinyl itself, how it's designed and how it looks, has a real stoner vibe. And I know they're smoking a lot of weed in this movie, but I never think of this movie as a stoner movie.
What?
I'm very serious. I mean that very genuinely. I mean that so genuinely.
Are you talking about the smiley face?
Yeah. Because the smiley face looks all hot and stuff.
All right. At the core, Fast Times, sex movie. Dazed, stoner movie. There's no debating that.
It's a movie about frequenting your local establishments, your pool hall,
They're much more than those
towers.
Films. They're much more than those descriptions.
Fair.
So here's my quick little
maybe it's just my
story about the Dazed and Confused smiley face. So when I was running for class president when I was in high school, my sister Erica helped me make all these cool posters, and one was a Pink Floyd The Wall poster, like voting for Ryan.
Not shocked.
The cross hammers and everything. One was some Grateful Dead bears, and then I used the Dazed and Confused smiley face on tons of them. So
I was putting out a stoner vibe, I just didn't realize it.
I'm just saying, I won.
But what I love about that so much is even everything you're talking about were such like wonderful throwbacks to like other high school times, but were so recognizable. And I think it just speaks to like what Dazed and Confused meant. It's about the 70s, but it felt like very relevant to your, 90s high school life.
Oh yeah,
I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I like stoner culture, just not being a stoner.
Yeah, but it's so weird, is I mean that so genuinely, and I know the title is Dazed and Confused, but I never think of this as like a stoner movie.
Oh, good God. I think I'm getting a check mark in my category.
Can I tell you, I think you win the story category now for me saying, maybe I don't understand what this movie is about.
You're sitting here going in like really intently trying to dissect this movie for way more than what it is. Yeah, so all right, so moving on from soundtrack.
Dazed wins.
Kind of next one would be the iconic characters.
Oof, this is tough.
This is a head-to-head of Wooderson versus Spicoli.
I assumed because we wouldn't feature Slater versus Spicoli.
No. There's also great characters, obviously. Yeah. I mean, Slater's another awesome character. I think there's a lot of great characters. I mean, obviously, Linda is a great character, like another iconic character. Like, there's Brad, I think. There's good characters.
Michelle.
But at the end of the day, when people talk about the movies, the first things they think of is Matthew McConaughey as Wooderson and, serious actor Sean Penn as Spicoli.
Okay, so it's Spicoli v. Wooderson. Who do you think wins? Are you
I'm Team Wooderson.
Oh my God. Team Spicoli?
I had a feeling this was gonna happen. I have come to appreciate Spicoli more. I think he's very funny at times, but again, he feels a little more misplaced in this movie.
Get out of here, Curtis. I don't hear you unless you knock.
But Matthew McConaughey just takes a character that should just be straight up creep and makes him awesome.
Be a whole lot cooler if you did.
I love when he's talking to at the car. He's talking to Marissa.
Ripsy, the Cynthia character.
Yeah, when he's just like, lose the losers being here, but we'll talk about that later. Like, he's just every line I'm hanging with.
Yeah, all right. I think you've won me back over to Wooderson. Do you know what one of my all-time favorite Wooderson lines is? I'm here. when they're trying to get him to leave, and he stays at the pool hall, and he goes, I'm here. And he just steps forward. I'm like, why is that the coolest anyone has ever been in the history of the earth?
But,
he's so awesome.
Spicoli, we can't deny. I mean, he the checkered,
That's my skull!
I love his line when he's just talking to Mr. Hanmer. He's like, I know that dude. Like, there's a lot of really great moments with him, and it's funny to see him now knowing the person that Sean Penn is. But I know Spicoli has a very special place in your heart.
Yes, it does.
So I was not surprised that we would probably be on different sides, ironically enough, in this category.
I experienced Fast Times through my dad and my brother wearing the checkered demons, as they call them, the Vans shoes, and doing the Spicoli dance before I saw Fast Times. Like, I knew the character before going in. Maybe that's why always Fast Times is such a shock to the system, because I'm just thinking about my dad and my brother doing that dance and not knowing there's a whole lot more to that film. But, so the Spicoli thing, like, reigns supreme in my mind, but, oh man, is Wooderson cool. I don't know, do we give it to Wooderson?
To me, no. At best, it's a tie.
It's at best a tie.
I mean, I think both are played by Oscar-winning... excellent actors, both just at their prime. Wooderson, maybe the only edge is that Matthew McConaughey has just made a career still on it. Like, it's an interesting kind of like, he obviously got up and did the all right when he won his Oscar.
When he did that, that's a top Oscar moment for me when he does that and just embraces. And he talks about that, how much he loves being known for Wooderson. Which is so cool. You would think he would want to be known for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Right. He dialed that up to 100.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, good time. All right, so we'll call this. I mean, both characters are great. Both characters have great lines, and both characters are funny.
What?
Both characters have heart. Both characters have stood the test of time. And again, if you talk to somebody that hasn't seen either movie, more than likely they know them.
Fantastic point. Let's call it a draw.
All right, draw it is. But it's a good time to now move on to the other thing about these movies. Quotes. Iconic quotes, right? Like... These movies are very quotable. Now it's gonna be interesting because I think Dazed is probably funnier and probably, because to me the most quotable lines from Fast Times are gonna come from Spicoli.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, those are gonna be the lines that if you're hanging with your friends, you make the line. Like, shouldn't drive on lewds or whatever. Like there's a lot of really good funny lines from Fast Times, but Dazed is just one after another.
Better entree. It's tough because I feel like
not everybody's out there running out there quoting Brad, right? Like
everybody's felt like Brad at work. But not everybody's quoting Brad. Yeah, I think that's like one of the hard things. So I was thinking about this, and I'm like, in the like kind of, gallery of like high school films, I wouldn't even say that these are the two most quotable high school films, but at that, I'll still give in my opinion, I was going to feel
Dazed
like we're
has a
Dazed.
lot, though.
You and I say a lot of things from Dazed and Confused to each other. Pretty frequently. Especially, it'd be a whole lot cooler if you did. We say that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, throughout that, every scene probably has a funny or quotable line throughout the entire movie. Like, men, 50 of you are going on a mission. 25 of you ain't coming back.
Yeah, 100%. And first off, one of the great moments is when he's smiling when he sees that they're scared. It's so demented, but it's so funny. And like there's a lot of like small lines too. Oh, another one that you and I quote all the time. I want to dance.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just in contact or out of context, it probably doesn't seem that funny, but in context, it's great. He has that other great line, I'm just trying to be honest about being a misanthrope. Like, there's just so many ones like that. There's Parker Posey. Okay, all right, gosh, my second F word of the podcast. Okay, you freshman fucks. Like, it's just great. Like, it's hard. It's a really fun movie to quote.
Yeah, I like when they talk about the coach's grandmother. 65.
$250. She was
Just
190 back in my day.
still drove that truck though. Like, no, you're right. There are so many like little moments like that, and I wonder how much of that, like some of those favorite lines, came from the improv of that. Like, all right is improv.
Yeah,
that was Matthew McConaughey brought that into the fold. There's a lot of kind of story about who Linklater based these characters on. They actually did try and sue, because there was a Randall Pink Floyd and and those people who grew up with him, but like, I don't know. There's, whether it's improvised or not, there's just a lot of great lines in that movie.
You talking about that with the suing of actors, of the character, that was a big thing, obviously, with Crow and Fast Times.
Was it?
So the guy, Andy Rathbone, who Mark Ratner, and I may have actually called him Rathbone earlier, so who Mark Ratner was based off of, he actually was really upset because he said that character was based off of him, but then he also had the cool parts. He says that he's the one that actually ordered the pizza to the room, and he did a lot of that. They gave a lot of his stuff to Spicoli. Funny kind of thing about this guy, he ends up going on and writing a good majority of the For Dummies books. So that guy is who, when you're watching, Mark Ratburn, that's who the guy went on to write all the For Dummies books.
I'm befuddled, my friend. You've just thrown some knowledge at me that I was not expecting. One, you can't be both Spicoli and Mark. Those two, the limit does not exist. You cannot be both of those characters. Secondly, Mark, embrace it, man. You were the only nice guy outside of Brad and Charles in the entire movie. There's a lot of garbage people in this movie. And I mean that in the way in which we are oftentimes flawed as teenagers. But it's just, interesting to me because it's they always say to writers, write what you know, but then when it becomes big, it's okay, but now you might get sued for writing that,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's right. And it's interesting that they have that connection, these two films, that they both had people who felt hey, my likeness.
I'm a little surprised to hear that about Dazed. Obviously, Fast Times I wasn't, because I knew it was based off the book that he had things, so the characters obviously were going to be, and my understanding was, they really, for years, kept it under wraps what school he was in. Actually, the students were eventually the ones, and most of that was so that there wasn't an issue with being sued.
Can you imagine going to that high school and seeing an interview with Cameron Crowe and being oh, hell, that guy went to our high school. Yeah. Wait, he wasn't a student? Can you imagine that experience of finding that information out? Kind of wild. So are we giving quotable to Dazed? Is that where we're settling? Yes. Okay, I think, that's fair.
Yes, you can't argue there. I had most iconic scene. I feel like we've talked him to death. I don't think there's really a need to, I don't even know really. Maybe Wooderson, maybe the paddling stuff. I don't.
I was trying.
It's funny. I don't know if you have. I mean, unfortunately, there is a most iconic scene in Fast Times. That is.
I wrote in my notes, he wins this. Yeah. Not for reasons I really want to talk about, but he wins this.
Right.
Yeah, because I think that kind of, and this actually might come back to perhaps a mark towards the story element we were talking earlier, Dazed, because again, it's kind of slice of life. There's not really, I think, one iconic scene in particular. I think there's definitely things you pull clips, and I think it's going to be Wooderson at the pool hall is probably one of those clips you pull. Interesting, when Mitch throws the bowling ball?
Yeah.
That actually happened. He wasn't supposed to throw the bowling ball out the window.
BS!
No, he didn't throw it at the car. No.
I saw how Mitch threw. That ball went an inch in front of that car.
Do you know he lied about being a pitcher to get the role, and then he came out and Linklater had to hire a pitching coach. No, so what happened is they were driving down the street filming the scene. He wasn't supposed to drop the bowling ball because it was going to cut away to then eventually the shot of the car. He dropped the bowling ball outside of the car, so the reaction you see from Pickford is genuine to, oh my God, he just threw the bowling ball out of the car. But he didn't hit the window because you're right, he can't throw for anything. All right, so moving on from iconic scenes, where does that take us then?
So now we're at the actor launching pad. And I think we can breeze through this a little bit.
I find this challenging.
Well, what are we basing on it, right? I think that will be the interesting thing. I added it up. I have 5 Oscar winners coming out of this film.
What 5?
I just invoked the holy Oscar.
Yeah, I know you did. Because that's exactly the argument I was going to throw. Who do you have?
I got Sean Penn.
Sean Penn.
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah.
Cameron Crowe for writing.
Which one did
he
write?
won for Almost Famous.
That's right. You're not wrong.
Nicolas Cage.
Yes.
Which we haven't talked about, which I'll give you a tidbit of hint in a second. Nicolas Cage was in this movie. Yes, folks.
Yeah.
He was a very big part as one of Brad's friends. Funny thing, this was his first ever movie. He was Nicholas Coppola in the movie. Changed his name because of this movie because he was so bullied. And he would never say who it was, but a lot of the actors just kept quoting
Sofia Coppola.
No. Sorry, why is this escaping me? Apocalypse Now lines at him.
No.
And basically acting as if the only reason he got any part was because he was actually up for Brad. And they talk about the fact that he didn't get it because he had read for the part 11 times, but he made it too dark.
I see that.
Yeah.
I see it.
So they end up casting him. He ends up changing his name after Fast Times because of he didn't want people to think that, and he didn't like being bullied.
Ryan William Tocci just dropping all sorts of knowledge left and right, leaving me stunned.
And I apologize. I said that there were 5. There was 4 Oscar winners, 5 nominated. Jennifer Jason Leigh was nominated as well for
I didn't think she had won, but I remembered that she had been nominated.
So what do you got?
Well, all right. So I was going to go with the Oscar thing first because you've got Matthew McConaughey. You've got Ben Affleck. You've got Richard Linklater. You've got Renee Zellweger.
I was wondering if you were going to remember Zellweger.
Yeah. Renee Zellweger.
Wait, who do you have? Who did you say?
Matthew McConaughey.
Uh-huh.
Why am I blanking? Oh my gosh, Renee Zellweger.
Okay.
Ben Affleck.
Okay.
And then Richard Linklater. Didn't he win for something for Boyhood and I was mad about it?
Oh.
Am I right? Didn't he win for screenplay? I gotta fact check myself.
What screenplay was Boyhood?
That's fair. I thought
maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. You could be right about that.
I'll have to fact check myself because he
was nominated if nothing.
He was nominated, and I may have had him listed under nominations, and I might be misremembering that Oscar season, mainly because I felt like it was talked about so much that Oscar season. But what I find really interesting about this, because I would say definitively the Renee Zellweger, Ben Affleck, Matthew McConaughey trifecta of Oscar winners is pretty impressive. You have a lot of other careers that come out of this. Joey Lauren Adams, obviously much more prominent, particularly in the 90s. Parker Posey, who is kind of that person in a lot of things. Adam Goldberg, who's had a very steady career. Anthony Rapp, who he was in a Tony Award winning Broadway musical, which is Rent. He originated the role of Mark. Cole Hauser, in some way, he's had a very consistent career.
Had an up trajectory, and then it's completely dropped out at this point. But I mean, I actually like Cole Hauser, so
you would. Yeah. So it's one of those very odd things to me when you're looking at this cast, because Mila Jovovich being a big person within this.
I remember they made such a big deal about her being in this movie when it came out, and she has such a background part. It's kind of crazy.
But you know what? The thing is, I'll say, is her part, and maybe it's just because she's Mila Jovovich and she's just kind of fascinating to watch. I find her fascinating to watch in the movie, even if it's not a remarkably in-depth performance. She's just kind of interesting to see. She does small things that I think are kind of interesting. But all of those actors had pretty fruitful careers post Dazed and Confused.
They did. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, obviously we talked about Judge Reinhold is a staple. Everybody knows Judge Reinhold.
Yes.
So, that's huge. But you are right. Phoebe Cates is such a name. She took it back. She went to be, when she had kids, she was married to Kevin Kline. She is married to Kevin Kline. When she had kids, she kind of pretty much retired from acting. So her career just kind of stopped at one point. But, such another great 80s actress. Ray Walston, he was my favorite Martian as Mr. Han.
Yeah.
Interesting. That actually was supposed to go to Fred Gwynn.
Sometimes dead is better.
You didn't go with Herman Munster, huh?
There are many one of my all-time favorite quotes from Herman Munster was about him trying to teach Eddie about like why you should accept everyone.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I just saw that recently.
I think someone we know on Instagram had posted it, and every time I see it, I well up a little bit.
But he actually didn't take it because he was supposed to be it and then didn't like the content of the film. So
I gotcha. Okay.
He decided to take the movie later on about the, cats and people coming back from the dead.
Sometimes it is better.
But yeah, so that was an interesting, Amanda Wyss, who played Lisa, who was Brad's girlfriend. She was a big 80s actress, Better Off Dead.
That's who she is!
Do you know her huge notoriety in the horror community, though? She is Freddy Krueger's first victim. She was Tina Gray.
Wow.
And
good for you for knowing that.
But then we also have, don't sleep on, we got Anthony Edwards, Goose himself, Dr. Green, and actual best friends at the time who got the movie role together to play Spicoli's friends, Stoltz.
Yeah, Stoltz.
Eric Stoltz, who's, hung around.
Stoltz could be, you know what? It's maybe a mark to say he could have been a carefree version of McFly, man. He seems pretty carefree in this.
You know what? I had this question come up, and I want to ask this to you.
Yeah.
So anybody, I'm assuming, is Eric Stoltz at this point more known for his acting roles or the guy that got fired from Back to the Future?
100% the latter.
Yeah. I think it might be true at this point.
Yeah, it really is, because I think at this point, I don't think
they done him dirty, as you would say.
Yeah, they do him real dirty. It's kind of interesting when you talk about, like, the actors that are in this. I think we both have some serious, and I hate to say it this way, like household name actors in the films. I would say Matthew McConaughey and Ben Affleck, I think, give Dazed kind of an edge. Most people are not going to remember that Renee Zellweger was in it, so I don't know if she 100% counts for this.
I threw Nicolas Cage in here. He's in, like...
I remember that Nicolas Cage was in it, but, like, so I would say that's something that leans me more towards Dazed, because it feels like it was a really good launching pad for that. And Renee Zellweger, she had actually auditioned for a larger role and just didn't get it. And obviously she ends up having a very fruitful career. And Matthew McConaughey, as you brought up, that great Oscars moment, like, he keeps the DNA of this film, like, very much a part of his, like, or I should say makes this very much the part of his career in terms of its DNA, in terms of things he refers back to. So I think I'm leaning a little more Dazed, but I feel like you brought up some really important actors too.
I think it's hard to argue that it's a tie.
Yeah, it's because different types of careers and different, because does launching pad mean they got so many roles off of this, or does launching pad mean they had the most consistent career after this? Because I think of all of the actors we've talked about, it's a real
testament to both movies, actually.
It really is, yeah.
And I think it really goes back to the chemistry, right? Why we talk about the chemistry really works with both sets of cast. Because they were great actors on top of it.
And I think this brings us to some closing arguments. So I think let's each take the opportunity to mention anything we hadn't mentioned yet, and to make the case for why our film is the superior high school film. Ryan, you first.
All right. No, so I do want a couple of things for both films, I think, to talk about, a couple of small trivia things I just thought were interesting here was, did you know that Forrest Whitaker, he was actually an opera singer, and he was at school for being, and they were casting, so he just went over with some buddies just on a whim to audition, and ends up getting this part.
That's so cool. And his phenomenal speaking voice is so indicative of that training.
Right?
Wow. Yeah. Right on.
And then do you know what his second movie is? This is his first. Do you know what his second movie is?
No.
All-time greatest sports movie, Vision Quest.
Really? Yes. Oh, that's funny.
So that was just, one thing I thought was interesting. The movie was shot over 8 weeks. It was actually in a working high school.
Oh, wow. That's rare.
That's how big the campus on the school was. So I guess this wasn't, a couple of things I thought were interesting for both films. Just kind of looking, IMDb had them at They were 7.2 for Fast Times and 7.6 for Dazed. So I thought it was interesting that they were both so close like that. However...
That's on a 10-point scale for IMDb if you're not...
Something I'm going to tell you is probably going to lean in your way here for the Rotten Tomatoes. 77% for Rotten Tomatoes, and then 80% on the audience score. It wasn't a super well-received film at the time. People didn't get it. And I mean that in they thought it was confusing on whether this was a raunchy comedy because of how it was,
Yeah.
And Roger Ebert absolutely hated it. He loved your movie.
I'm not surprised as someone who has watched and read a lot of Roger Ebert's commentary. I'm not shocked he doesn't love Fast Times. I'm curious
if he changed later, because I know he changed a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But Rotten Tomato, though, for Dazed, 92%.
That's right, certified
and
fresh.
90% on the audience score. So I was a little surprised by that. I thought that was really quite interesting. Honestly, one of the things I also thought with both films were looking at how they were marketed. Because you look at the two posters, obviously. Fast Times is Spicoli and all the zaniness of Spicoli, right? It's not what that movie's about. I think Dazed works a little bit better. But the taglines were interesting. Dazed's confused tagline was, "It was the last day of school in 1976, a time they'd never forget, if only they could remember."
Which is so reductive.
And I agree. We talked about whether it was a stoner movie. It is, but it's a much more sophisticated stoner movie. Like, that just can I tell you why
that makes me mad? Because again, I'm going to claim that, yes, there's a lot of weed in this movie, but I'm not going to classify it super just stoner flick. And that just markets it that way. But I also get why you want to market that way.
How about this? Fast Times.
Yeah.
And I know we've gone battle, but you got their tagline: fast cars, fast girls, fast carrots. ... Fast carrots ? Literal tagline for this movie on a poster.
So sometimes Hollywood's scared when women direct films and then make stupid taglines that are also so insane. It's kind of like sometimes the insulting thing that I think is to Fast Times that I remember, like, the Phoebe Cates scene. Like, that's so insulting to what the film is. And listen, this film deals with a lot of very complicated sexual politics and a lot of very complicated sexual situations, for sure. And some really obviously questionable and hard things. But oh my gosh, to reduce that movie to that scene,
completely.
Ugh.
Absolutely awful. Now, it's funny, I want to say this with you talking about this, Amy Heckerling being a female director, and kind of once they got into the editing process and things that were changed, this movie they were fighting not to get an X rating, because the scene that's so changed is the pool house scene between Stacy and Damone. Amy Heckerling wanted that to be full frontal nudity for Damone, and not for Stacy. Yeah. And that was how it was shot. But they would not. And they literally said something along the lines of, the male genitalia is aggressive and the female is passive. And that's why one will get an X rating as the other will get an R rating.
And if you ever wanted to know what is wrong with the MPAA, Ryan just distilled it in a sentence.
So it's just interesting because she was trying to so much show just a different type of film. And even that, they had a fight just to, and that was one of the things. So in the scene, it's basically, the scene's blown up, so it ends up cutting out what would have been Damone's,
So I have a question, and I'm very curious if there is, like, I wonder Heckerling's editing this now and distributing this now, how different this looks. And I would say we're still in Hollywood very, very regressive about how we represent female sexuality, but I'm curious if she gets a very different edit and cut on this. And I'm not necessarily saying it towards the nudity, I'm just saying in general how certain aspects are handled, and certainly how it's marketed.
Yes, I agree completely. It's just some of the things that I just think do, though, make this, even with the stuff she had to fight for, but that's what I think I love about this movie, is just, it's a complete film to me. I think these characters are really thought out and fleshed out and really well done, and you
feel every emotion with them as you go on this journey through this year with them, and that's what I love about it. And this is why I love Dazed. I love Dazed so much. It's funny and it's great. But why this movie, I'm taking it on my island with me, is because I literally feel like I care about all these characters. I just definitely care about them all. And the one thing I will also say is 2005, Fast Times at Ridgemont High did get put onto the National Film Registry in the Library of Congress. Another film did not as of yet.
Give it time.
It should be.
It really should be. Here's the thing. Well said all around. I also love Fast Times. I don't love it as much as I love Dazed and Confused, and I think that's very clear from this. But for every reason you said, I think Fast Times was ahead of its time. To be punny here, I think it's something that I would love to see that character of Stacy explored now, and see how we handle. I think there'd be really something there, but I think Amber Heckerling was doing really brilliant things, and clearly she had a real knack for telling female-driven stories. I mean, look what happens with Clueless a few years later, obviously a bunch of years later. My closing arguments for Dazed and Confused is, it to me recaptures what a night feels like when you're with your friends in high school.
Yeah.
Directionless, aimless, full of hope and full of expectations, but with the understanding that probably a lot of that's not going to be fulfilled. I don't favor the violence in Dazed and Confused. Actually, the first time I watched Dazed and Confused, I hated it because of the O'Banion stuff. I didn't like the hazing. It felt very uncomfortable to me, and I couldn't really get around the film at that point. But then the more I watched it, I realized, for me, who did not grow up in the 70s, who did not grow up in Texas, I felt like something was being represented to me that wasn't mine, but I felt like I experienced and owned. I love the way in which these characters weave in and out of each other's friends group. I feel like that feels genuine. We're not as discreet in high school as we like to think with friend groups. We kind of like drift between. I like the ways in which these teenagers are trying to like buck authority, but clearly are so stuck in the traditions that they're doing of these things that like they'll point out and say, that's kind of wrong, we're doing these air raids, but at the same time it's tradition. Like, I love kind of the exploration of what it feels like to be on the crest of summer, for your shoulders to be rolling back because the school year's over, and for what that next part of your identity is going to look like, and just kind of the open road ahead. I don't know that every high school film does that. I don't think every high school film approaches that expectations versus reality. I don't think every high school film approaches just the casual ease of what it is to be a teenager. I think once we stop being teenagers, we have so many thoughts of what that looks like, so many fears and anxieties of what teens are like. Or I hear this all the time. They just sit on their phones. No, they don't. They just do that when you're in the room, I feel like Dazed and Confused really captured something for me. Again, it wasn't my life in high school, but it felt like something like that. And I think that's what I really appreciate. I like the authenticity of it. My fun fast fact, and I'll appreciate it. So the burger shop that they go to in this film is actually, it was a real burger shop. I think it's called, is it Top Hat or Top something? I feel bad. I can't remember the name of it right now. But one of the things Top Notch Burger. It still exists in Austin, Texas. It was bought by, it passed through generations. When the son of the original owner passed away, someone else bought it. It still exists in Austin, Texas. It was also a filming location. It is the burger spot in Varsity Blues. Nice. It is much beloved in Austin, Texas. And this is a film that I feel like kind of really captures kind of small town experience, but then so much more universally just captures what it feels like to be young and just want to be in the car with your friends.
I can't argue with that. You saying that, I'm like, yeah, I totally, I'm going back to those moments of, hanging out with my friends and driving. We had a Delaware Avenue and we'd cruise up and down.
Only so many times though, right?
Only last so many times. Or stand out in front of a building or somebody drives by and tells you where to go and you guys all meet up there. So you're not wrong there. And I think that is a huge argument to be made on why Dazed is such a brilliant, film. I kind of think it says, we're sitting here, I'm like, I think it goes back to, as we kind of close it out, I'm looking at this list, and honestly, if we probably in what we agree on what was winning.
Yeah.
I still arguing that director aspect, but Dazed seems to get the edge here, and I don't think that's. I don't think I disagree with that. Because I think if you're sitting me down on a Tuesday night or any night and you go, hey, pick a movie, probably Dazed is the easier movie to watch, and that's not a cut. I mean that as a positive.
No, I get what you're saying.
It's a more enjoyable, fun experience. The grittiness of Fast Times can be a little bit tougher, and it feels a little more dated. Although Dazed this time watching it is starting to age a little bit from a visual standpoint more than I was expecting. But yeah, Dazed is just a fun sit down. You enjoy it, nostalgic type movie, even if it isn't your, like you said, even if it isn't your exact, experience. It still has that. So I can't argue with that aspect. So probably in the end. I think I still make an argument that Fast Times is probably a better, more well-constructed film, but I think Dazed probably is the more enjoyable, probably the go-to film.
That's fair. I think that we can have a Tocci agreement that there are ways to appreciate both these films.
I'm probably wrong on that, and Dazed is probably just the clear winner here.
It is. It totally is, but I'm going to give you this because you said so nice at the end.
I have to ask this, though. This is a big question I have to ask you, though. Out of these movies, what character are you?
I don't think I'm any of these characters. I don't see myself really in any of them.
In either film?
In either.
Interesting.
I'd say the closest is Cynthia. Marissa Ripsey's characters from. Yeah, I would say she's the character that can.
Is that because you have red hair now?
No, it's not. It's because I had friends like Mike and Tony.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about too.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I see myself more as
a little wiser than everybody, your peer group.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Kind of on, but
she's
still want to be a part of the group.
Yeah, but she's less awkward than I am. I am as awkward as I was in high school. Just with probably a little bit more self-assurance than I once had. So not really any of the characters, but at the same time, probably Cynthia. Do you have a character that you probably kind of point to?
Yeah, I could probably see myself, and obviously nothing's going to be exact. A couple of different characters with different ways. Like, I can understand the Mitch and having some older people take me under my wing. But in the end, to me, it's Mark. That was probably me. Completely. And, I certainly had a Damone, but we won't talk more about that. We'll just leave that right there.
I'm going to say this. You're much cooler than Mark. You don't give yourself enough credit.
Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this with you. Both movies we both just absolutely love. Even when we got, in a funny, contentious way here. Yeah. At the end of the day, put on both movies. We're going to enjoy them. They're both great. They're both classics for a reason.
Would you say, how could you not enjoy Dazed and Confused and Fast Times at Ridgemont
Exactly.
High? Right on.
No, actually, the better question, how could you choose?
How could you choose?
How could you choose?
That's our actual how could you. Don't make us do it DVD pack. I love that our how could you changed by the end of the episode.
Yes.
If you're not already, please follow us on social media, on Instagram at How Could You Podcast. You can see our travel adventures from our summer vacation episode and also get all of the information about our upcoming episodes. You can also follow us on Twitter at How Could You Pod. You can send us email suggestions or thoughts about the episode to howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. We've got a lot of fun and exciting things coming for season 3, so make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels to get those updates.
Yeah, you're right. We have a big lineup ready for you guys. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for episode 2. We can't wait to share it with you. And until next time, keep living and enjoy the Odyssey.